Okay, so welcome officially, everyone, and we will get started. Okay, so as I was just talking to the group as we were getting started, that I know some of you are watching this later and not live. So I'm going to monitor the chat as we do it live because there will be people with questions and I'm hoping to respond to those. For everyone who is watching the replay, or even if you think about it later, I've set up a question submission form. So actually you can send me, I'll drop it in towards the end. So you can actually send me questions if you would like during the week that I will respond, or sorry, that I'll respond to tomorrow or on Wednesday, happily. So that might work for people, I hope so. Okay. Here we go. I want to talk about stress. And so that means that what I'm going to say and the questions you're going to ask, and we're going to, the discussion we're going to have is actually really important. And so there we go, is really important. And so ideally, if you could, I would suggest that you could allow yourself this luxury of still being focused. And it's funny, so often, and so I'm just going to get started right away by approaching things in a way that people don't usually approach them. And say that rather than think, oh, this is a bit important, or I'd like to know this, I'm interested, I'm really going to, focus in, is I think about this as a luxury, right? How often do you get to stop and sit for 45, 60 minutes and just do something that you're particularly interested in, that you think will help you? So come at it from this point of view, that, it's the luxury of being relaxed and still, if you can, please, silence your phone, close other windows and so on. Ideally, you could watch, there'll be slides. So ideally you could watch it on a bigger screen and put your phone in another room or somewhere. It's your time, so let's make the most of it. Essentially, here's what I call it a promise, which is a bit stressful. No, but it's what I am planning to do is I want to make sure that you have an idea or an understanding of how you can interrupt some of the underlying causes of stress. And as you'll see, this isn't sort of looking at stress as like the symptoms of stress, or stress as a symptom, which is really how I treat it. It's about looking at the causes and being smart about how you would unravel those causes so that the actual sort of stress wouldn't happen in the first place. That's really what we're going for here. And of course, once you can do that, then you can pull stress out like right from the root. That's the whole point, or at least have it working for you, which we'll talk about today and the next couple of days. All right, so here we go. I'm going to try to get some engagement from you. Tell me, have you ever gone out to do something you really like doing? Favorite restaurant or cafe or beach, somewhere like this, and found that you didn't actually enjoy yourself? Tell me, have you ever had this happen? Give me a yes or a no. Thank you, Debbie. Have you ever been so stressed that you went and tried to do something, said, oh, I'm really strung out, I'm going to go do this, and actually found that you didn't enjoy it as much as you would have often? Yeah, okay, good. So yeah, it's important to understand, and this is going to be really important as we go, that approach it's not useless. You can use those sorts of things. Oh, I'm really strung out, I'm meeting up with my best friend for a coffee, or I'm going to go surfing or skiing or snowboarding or whatever it is you might like doing. These are all totally, I'm on board. But they're not addressing the root causes of stress, which is what we're going to look at here. Tell me, have you ever followed expert advice about stress, how to relax and these sorts of things, and found that it didn't really help? I'm particularly interested in this, if you wouldn't mind just letting me know. Okay. Yeah. Well, then I'm here to tell you that it's really not your fault, right? We've come here to talk about stress, and in particular today, we're going to look at this idea of happiness, which is almost overdone in a way. It's like banging on about happiness all the time. But it is really, if you get it right, then it's a direct antidote to stress. And I'll show you why. That's not the whole story. There's more to it, which is why this is in 3 parts. But let's have just a quick look at it. If you can develop this sense of well-being and happiness, then what you're looking at is learning well-being as a skill. I know some of you have heard me say this before, that well-being is something that it's a result, you could say. It comes about based on the right causes. So if you can pull those causes together, then what you get is a sense of well-being. It doesn't mean you don't face adversity. It doesn't mean things aren't difficult. It doesn't mean any of that. But what it means is your own well-being can remain fairly level, even cultivate it and increase it as you go. This means you wake up in the morning confident that you can handle what's coming, not that you know what's coming, or that things aren't coming that you're really going to worry you, but that you're confident you can get through it, which is a big deal. As we'll see later, that your interpretation of stress is really important. Is this something I can cope with or not? And the second you decide it's something you can't, your stress, the experience of stress is entirely different. So it's important to figure out how you boost your ability to deal with it. And then of course you want to finish your day feeling that you did your best, and you can leave that stress at work or at home, wherever your source of stress is, right? Then of course you become the person that people rely on. So that's a great feeling, and you cultivate that over time. So this is what the approach, or if you like, the way I'm thinking about this in this way. Really quickly, for those of you who don't know me, I actually started off as a musician. That was me playing piano some time ago in Toronto, when I lived in Toronto for 8 years. So I did a music degree there. I got really interested in meditation and concentration to play music. So I took off to India. I lived up in the Himalayan region for a total, I bounced around, total of 6 years or more. I learned to read, speak, write Tibetan. So I studied Tibetan Buddhist philosophy, meditation, and so on, sort of in Tibetan, if you like, with Tibetans, and started translating, interpreting, and written translation. When I came back to Australia, I did a psychology degree and Sanskrit, actually, at Sydney University. And right now, I'm in the middle of a PhD researching a lot of the techniques and topics that I'm talking about in relation to stress and anxiety and depression in particular. So there you go, enough of that. Let's get back to this. So I don't like to be critical, but I'm going to put up, here's some stuff. I searched for this a while ago, and when I was doing some work on burnout and part of my lit review for the PhD, and I went to a very good organization's website, who I've actually have associations with, and I looked up their advice on burnout, how to prevent burnout as a carer, healthcare professional, these sorts of things. And here's what they said. Health building activities, exercise, massage, yoga, meditation, eating healthy foods, drinking plenty of water, use natural healing products to care for you and heal your body, practicing the art of self-management, just say no. So I don't know if you've ever experienced burnout or worked with people who are on the brink or past the threshold of burnout. So I do, and I have. And I can tell you that most people I've met who are on the brink of burnout or already there would get really annoyed if they told them to do any of these things as a solution to their burnout and stress. So, on burnout, I have people who burn out, they just can't make decisions. They just don't care anymore, even about things they used to be passionate about. And you tell them to drink more water, or just say no, or find some natural healing products. It's not going to help. Not maybe for a second or two, but it isn't going to help. I mean, there's more. Organizing your life so you become proactive, it doesn't mean anything. And reserving your life energy, living a balanced life. This last one, I really caught my attention, because if you're dealing with people who are really stressed, and you tell them just to sit quietly, especially if they're healthcare professionals or carers, I mean, parents, teachers, you name it, that if you tell them to sit quietly, what they will do, it's called a negativity bias. It's a very, you'll learn about this in your first year psychology class if you did one, that our attention tends to be drawn towards things that are negative, that is threatening, or they get us angry or sad. It's why we sort of focus on our mistakes rather than our successes and these sorts of things. So my point is not to just go out sort of bagging a particular organization. Of course, you don't know who it is, and I'm not going to tell you. But that some really mainstream advice by people who are, let's call them experts in their field, and well looked up to at least, are really giving advice that I think is mostly useless, occasionally a little bit harmful. Okay. No, Corey, tell us what you really think. Yeah, that's where we're at. Okay. Yeah, that's right. I mean, this overwhelm, as Lorraine's saying, is a big deal, which is why we need to get past, and what all of these things do, they have a few things in common that we're going to look at. One of the things that all these do is they treat stress as this, as a big thing. It's like, oh, you're stressed, so here's an antidote to stress. But everyone's stress is different. Everyone's stress has actually slightly different causes, and some things are more, potent or powerful than others. And as long as you're feeling, oh, I'm stressed, I need to reduce my stress, as long as that's the level of thinking, then you're not thinking about the causes and the things that are driving that resultant stress. Okay. And as long as you're doing that, you've got Band-Aid solutions, you're actually kind of in trouble, to be honest. What we need to do, and I have some research behind me to do this, and to know that I'm not alone here, look past that and look at, what's driving the stress? What sort of things are driving that? And a lot of those are going to be what we call cognitive. They're going to be mental. And so that's where we're going to start to look in a lot of ways. The way we think about things really informs the way we experience those things. Okay. So you're told to do all these things, get massages. What have we got? Reserve your life energy. I'm not quite sure what that means, but like I say, it's just a quote. Become proactive instead of reactive, these sorts of things. There's actually, the beauty of this is that there's a much simpler way that's way more effective. And sadly, we're not really taught, I think it's fair to say, how stress works, or how we should best respond to it. So how am I doing so far? Are you okay? Give me a, what are you talking about, or it's okay, or something in the chat box, so I know that I'm not losing anyone. Is it okay? Oh, don't be shy. Okay, thanks. All right, you just drop the question. Yeah, okay, you just drop the questions in there as we go, all right? So okay. From my perspective, you basically have two ways of dealing with stress. Okay. First way, I say drown it out, right? And yeah, your second option is, I say figure it out. It's just kind of gimmicky, I know, but it works really well actually. And I'd just like to talk about these. Most of the advice that you get from professionals, from people helping you out with stress, are in the first category. All those things I put up previously, with the exception perhaps of meditation and yoga, and even then, only if you do it right and get taught properly, are in that first category, drown it out. Get a massage, go out into nature, go walking, do these sorts of things, meet up with friends, all good things to do, but as we'll see, very much in this first category. Sometimes people talk about it as distracting yourself. Even research papers talk like this. I find it infuriating, to be honest. Some of you would have read the pieces. I've written a few pieces about how distraction is the problem, not the solution. People say distract yourself, but that's not what's happening is that as you're out doing something you enjoy, right? I asked you in the very, very beginning, have you ever gone out to a restaurant, cafe, gone somewhere that you like and found you didn't enjoy yourself? Quite likely what was happening is that instead of paying attention to the thing that you are doing, you were distracted by these causes of stress. And so that's a really important thing to understand. It's the distraction that's the problem. So this idea of distracting yourself, I put it up there because that's what you'll read, but frankly, it's a mistake. So here's some examples. And believe me, these are from my own experience. Drowning it out. So of course, drugs, sex, and rock and roll, TV, social media, junk food, these sorts of things, that totally, shopping is another one that we use to distract ourselves. There's another, put these sort of two categories here, like exercise, meditation apps, going out for a walk, meeting with friends, and these sorts of things. Also the drown it out category. But of course, the first type are mostly unhealthy, right? Whereas the second type is kind of healthy. So there's actually drown it out sort of attempts or methods that aren't necessarily unhealthy in and of themselves. The only issue that I have with them here is that they won't address your root cause of stress. Okay, so drown it out. Let's say there are two types of drowning it out, healthy and unhealthy. And most of us have tried a good deal of both, myself included. Of course, you have this other option here, figure it out. And this is harder because the people who know the most about stress and its causes are researchers who don't really talk to anybody else. So that's hard. You need to find someone or some way to bridge that gap. And then understand how it works, and then use techniques to get it on your side. You could call it like escapism versus tackling something head on. In a way, I think that's a fair way of talking about this. And to be clear, I am not 100% against escapism. I really do believe it has its place, but you need to know that that's what it is. So, when you engage in escapism, even if it's professional advice, right, and told you to do it, but you expect long-term actual results, then that's where the problem is. You're headed for trouble. It's a one-way ticket to burnout in some ways. However, if you just go, wow, that was a rough day, or that was a rough week even, and then just do something to, get your mind off it, or maybe to watch TV, or go out to a restaurant, eat a tub of ice cream, whatever it is, but you do so knowing that's what you're doing, it's not so harmful. And I joke about it. My wife and I talk about this sometimes. We're both under pressure from time to time, which does happen. You just turn on the TV and pull the curtains, and we say it out loud. I'm just going to drown this shit out. That's what we're doing. It's not sort of, there's no expectation of a long-term result. So that's where we're at, and that brings us finally, I guess, what brings us to here, to try to help with this idea of figuring it out. And there are lots of components to stress, so I've just picked three. The first one we're going to look at today, types of happiness. As I said at the beginning, happiness is like a direct antidote to stress. So, and you can train in it. You can train in well-being. You can get good at it. It's a skill you can learn if you know how it works. So, direct antidote to stress. However, there are some things that will get in the way. This is a big one that's come up a lot, and some of you here are from the Beyond Mindfulness Method course that I have online. And so this came up quite recently and turned into a really interesting conversation about guilt versus regret. And we'll look at that tomorrow. And empathy, compassion, which is something I have been banging on about for almost 10 years, actually, to healthcare professionals, trying to figure out how we can help stop this mass exodus from the healthcare profession, teaching profession, and so on, because simply not understanding the difference between empathy and compassion, how they work together. Okay, so there you have it, a bit of a mission of mine. All right, so let's get into it. Happiness. You'd think this would be fun, but it can be a bit hard. Here's a couple of quotes, two people I'm quite, have a lot of time for. Many of you have seen me play this game before, some of you have not. Albert Einstein. Well-being and happiness never appeared to me as an absolute aim. I'm even inclined to compare such moral ambitions to the ambitions of a pig. So that's Albert, not mincing words. We have also someone I spent a lot of time listening to over the years, the Dalai Lama. He says, I believe the very purpose of our life is to seek happiness. Whether one believes in religion or not, whether one believes in this religion or that religion, we're all seeking something better in life. So I think the very motion of our life is towards happiness. So firstly, for those of you who haven't seen these two quotes before, who do you think is right? Because they're pretty polar opposites. What do you think? Don't be shy. And those of you at home watching on the replay, of course. A second. Yeah, thank you, Lorraine. Anyone else want to chime in, even if you have heard this before? Because of course some of you have, I know. Will's can say both, sure. Yeah. So, yeah. So that's right. Essentially, you could say both, as Will says, because it depends what they're not talking about the same thing, right? These two, this is my opinion, I guess. They're not talking about the same thing, because when it comes to this idea of happiness, and here's one of, I don't know if there's any psychologists here, but psychology isn't good with terminology. I'm just going to come out and say it. And so often, when someone's talking about one thing, but it means something to them, it means something different to the psychologist down the road or in a different state or wherever. And it's really problematic. So I'm just going to put it out there then, and I'll prove it fairly convincingly, I believe, that they're talking about different things. Okay. And, I've got some evidence. If you look at this is from Penn State University. So these are some questionnaires that you can fill in. You can find this online yourself. So email me or message me if you want the links. And they have these different questionnaires you can fill in which measure elements of happiness or well-being. You've got the Authentic Happiness Inventory, the General Happiness Scale, the PANAS questionnaire is the Positive and Negative Affect Survey. You've got the Emotions questionnaire, there's more. There's an Optimism test, Transgression Motivations questionnaire, Gratitude survey, right? There's more and more, that's not even it, there's more. So Managing in Life questionnaires, Compassion Love Scale, I've never done that one. So my point being that even in psychology, and of course for thousands of years of human history, there's not really very much agreement in what happiness actually is. So when you think about being happy as perhaps being an antidote to stress, or well-being, if you like, as an antidote to stress, and you're doing all these things that the experts tell you and that that you like doing, and it's not actually dialing down the stress to any large degree, well, I'm going to come back to this one main slide I put up before, which is this. It really isn't your fault. I do think if you understand what I'm about to say, and you have really good understanding of it, and you put it into practice, and then you're still really stressed, then you have to start taking some responsibility. But otherwise, no. So let's have a look. I am going to, for our purposes, divide happiness into two types. Right? Here we go. We call first one genuine happiness. Eudaimonia is a Greek word coined by Aristotle. I think evdainomia is how it's pronounced in Greece. And what we call hedonic happiness, or here in Queensland, I like to call it resource-driven happiness. Actually, we have someone from Alberta. You could call it resource-driven happiness as well. So we call that a type of happiness or well-being that's derived what we bring to the world. Ta-da! It's that simple. Okay. It's not resource-driven, right? You don't need external stuff to get it. Okay. A type of happiness or pleasure derived from what we get from the world. So now you're talking about resources. You need to get things from around you in order to be happy. Okay. How's that? Because some of you will have seen that for the first time. Does that make sense? It's remarkably uncontroversial, to be honest, in my experience. Is it okay? I hope there's no one at home thumping their keyboard and yelling at their monitor or something. Yeah. Is okay? Did you want to ask a question, Vessel? Just go ahead. Oh. You can't see the slides? Have we gone through this whole thing? Let's stop sharing. How's that? Oh, that's disappointing. Although it's good timing. Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah. Don't let me go on. But you interrupt me and let me know. Thanks, Vessel. That's great. Here we are. So that's what we've got. Okay. So let's look at this second one first. Okay. So I'll go back to here. We've got genuine happiness, derive what we bring to the world and then from the world. Genuine and what we call hedonic. Let's start with hedonic. First and probably most important is that it's not bad happiness. Okay, these are not good and bad, which is probably a session I should do for another time about things being black and white in our culture. Not bad happiness. For example, food when you're hungry, clothes when you're cold, an umbrella when it's raining, an upgrade to first class. Okay, these sorts of things are hedonic, and you actually need them. You can't get by without hedonic happiness. So it's not as if they're two. The only time they get us into trouble is when we mistake them. Okay, so don't start thinking, oh, there's hedonic and genuine, and I need to get rid of hedonic happiness and cultivate genuine happiness. You know, that's going to lead you to a lot of stress as well, actually. So let's have a look at this genuine eudaimonic, they say, happiness. A type of happiness or pleasure, you could say, derive what we bring to the world. And there are two things you need to know about this. One is what the causes are and how to develop them. And the second is what the obstacles are and how to eliminate them. Okay, so let's have a look. Some of the causes of genuine happiness: kindness, compassion, attention control is a big one. I go on about that a lot, so I'm trying to go easy on you today. What I call genuine relaxation, or natural relaxation. So these are the sorts of things that can cultivate your genuine happiness, levels of eudaimonia. The reason attention control is there's a lot of reasons, but because I've already mentioned once negativity bias, then it's probably worth mentioning it again, that the attention control, if you leave your attention alone and just let it be captured all the time and wander off, it will go into bad neighborhoods, right? Like it goes into negativity, finds things you're afraid of, wary of, get you angry, make you sad. Okay, there's an evolutionary context for this. It actually kind of makes sense. I've made the joke before, probably you've heard me, that a person who mistakes their garden hose for a snake. So I live in Australia, so their garden hose for a snake, there's no harm done, right? Actually, no harm done. A person who mistakes a snake for their garden hose is not going to pass their genetic material on to a further generation, very likely. So over these multiple generations, then we've kind of developed this negativity bias because there's no real loss, but there is a sort of gain. So if you leave your attention alone, it will tend to wander off, right? And of course, we don't like to follow it into bad neighborhoods, so we go to the pub or the fridge or the TV, Anyway, that's how it works. So there you've got certain things that cultivate genuine happiness, and one of them is actually having your attention under your control, which you can train to do fairly simply. So these are things we can cultivate, things we can learn or train in. Then we move on to obstacles, and obstacles are many. I want to talk about mistakes because it sort of feeds into what we're doing here. And one mistake we make are types of happiness. We chase after hedonic happiness, expecting the payoff of genuine. So that's a big problem, right? Not only that, we get professional advice to chase after hedonic and expect genuine. So to me, that's an issue. Another one that came up that I'm quite grateful for, because it came up recently, regret and guilt. This feeds into rumination and these things, which are part of my PhD, so I'm quite interested in that. And then finally, empathy and compassion, mistakes we make about those, mostly in our culture, equating empathy and compassion, which is a really, really dangerous thing to do. Okay, so two types of happiness, hedonic and genuine. You need them both. In fact, I'll argue that you need some amount of hedonic to even be thinking about the genuine, right? You can't be hungry or cold or out in the snow or the rain or wherever. So you need that. And then in order to, then you can start thinking about cultivating genuine sources. And of course, these are internal resources, I call them kindness, compassion, which we'll talk about soon enough on Wednesday, these things. And then if you're going to do that, and this is where these two, it's hard to separate them, the cultivation of causes and the eliminating mistakes, is that if you accept that, say, kindness and compassion can be developed and trained in, and that they are sources of genuine happiness, right? Oh yeah, that would make sense, you know. But then you think that empathy is compassion, right? It is going to end in disaster. Like, it's not just that. You need to actually know what they are. You're going to cultivate these causes, then you need to know what compassion is or kindness is. It takes a little bit of understanding, okay? And then I use this word, I am monitoring the chat in case you have questions, so do stop me if you need to. And I use this word cultivating causes very deliberately, okay? Because one of the things that's popped up already a few times is this idea of meditation, okay? So I would just like to hit you with a little bit more terminology, and then you'll see where I'm going with it. This term we translate as meditation in traditional source languages, what I would consider source languages, ancient Indian languages and Tibetan and so on. It means habituate or familiarize, or cultivate is a really nice way of translating it. What would you cultivate? Well, empathy, kindness, compassion, insight, attention, these sorts of things, right? So it's a really big deal to think about. One big, what's the word, obstacle I have when I'm teaching people is getting them to start thinking about meditation like this, instead of the way it's thought of in the West, you know, that it's some kind of hard thing, to top-down attention thing that you really focus on something. It's much, much broader in these cultures, in these source languages. It's just English is very clunky for what we're working on here. And then mindfulness, I'll just bring it up while it's here, because also in these source languages, it really just means remember. And the sorts of things you would remember would be, say, a focal object, right? So if you're in meditation or you work with me with meditation, you'll hear this word a lot, but also bigger picture goals. Or you need to remember that there's two types of happiness, for example. I need to remember that as I launch into some this hedonic type of happiness, I need to remember that it's hedonic and it's not got a long-term payoff. I need to be able to know that. And so you need to, that's where the mindfulness training comes in. It really helps you as you're hit with regret or guilt or empathy or compassion or types of happiness or stress, that you can remember how it works, and what to do about it, and the things you need to cultivate, the mistakes you need to sort of eliminate, so to speak, abandon. And then that just comes together as a whole picture of dealing directly with sources of stress. Is that all right? How are we doing? Especially people who haven't heard me speak like this before. Anyone? Not a very talkative bunch, are you? Okay. So everyone understands everything and having no trouble with it. So let's come back to this, right? Because this is where terminology just becomes so important, right? And what's important here is that when we're talking about two types of happiness, and I'm saying, well, they're not good or bad types of happiness, but they will cause you problems. And here's the problem that it will cause you, is that if you mistake the bottom one for the top one, that's the problem, okay? And so in order to sort of avoid that mistake, you need to be able to identify them as in real time. In order to do that, you need to remember there are two types of happiness. This is where the mindfulness training, which I'm not really talking about today, is so important. And remember further that what we're talking about here is a mistake which causes a huge amount of stress. We're not looking at the stress it causes and trying to figure that out. We're looking at something that causes stress. I'm under a lot of pressure at work. I have a genuinely stressful job, life, responsibility or something. And these experts keep telling me to go for a walk or go swimming or get fit or eat healthy, and I keep doing it and I keep being stressed. I keep doing these things that make me happy. Go to the beach. Yet my stress level basically, except for a little bit of avoidance, just rockets back up. Well, here's why. You're actually focusing on a temporary solution. Again, it's not your fault. And so to further complicate that, I would argue that hedonic happiness often doesn't look like genuine happiness. So this gets really, really big deal. And I'll hit you with one idea and then move on to sort of establish what I'm talking about. If you're eating something delicious, it really does. So I went down to Mooloolaba last night with my wife and my dog and got ice cream. And the whole purpose of the mission to get ice cream. And which is very hedonic, I'm aware of this. But as you eat something like an ice cream, it really does look, the appearance is as if there's some type of enjoyment in the ice cream that comes to me from outside, right? So it starts to look like the ice cream itself is kind of this source of genuine happiness because it can deliver the happiness to me as long as I eat it, as long as I engage with it. But if that were the case, so just put your logic on for a moment, if that were the case, then the more ice cream I ate, the happier I would be. I'm not even going to pause. There's no way around that. That's just true. Not only that, the ice cream, if it were a source of happiness, genuine well-being, could never turn into a source of suffering. But I'm willing to bet had I had a second, certainly a third ice cream, then it would have been very much a source of suffering and difficulty for me. So there is some evidence here that kind of shakes the appearance is I've got ice cream delivering me happiness. And it really looks like that. But the evidence is 100% against me. So, but as long as I believe the appearance, go, oh, ice cream is happy, beer is happy, whiskey's happy, cocaine, heroin, TV, shopping is happy. As long as you think like that, which is the appearance, of course, then you get a short-term benefit maybe that probably turns to suffering and difficulties, or at least at the very, very, very best, lets you off exactly where you got on, right? Which, sometimes I'm all for it. I've already said that. So we need to be able to remember this. And this idea of being able to differentiate between types of happiness is really important. So have a look at the guys on your screen right now. They're on the right, okay? If you ask them what they were doing, I'm willing to guess they would say relaxing. It looks like they're watching sports. I'm guessing they're watching a game on TV. No worries, I do this too. So that's cool, you'd say relaxing. And then they may have even been advised, oh, we're really stressed. Oh, why don't you get together and watch the game? Okay, right? No worries. But in terms of actually having a real impact on your overall stress levels and ability to cope with stress, negligible. It's still worth doing. In fact, when this is over, the Pipeline Masters is on, and I'm going to go watch that. So I watch sports too. So now have a look at this. Another person who I suspect would claim to be relaxing. Yeah, there you go. Would you say that that type of relaxation is the same as the first? What do you think? I've seen your comment there, Lorraine. That's good. Thank you. Depends on the person, yeah. It does. So here's the thing, and I like this juxtaposition because it speaks to this kind of this balance, if you like, between the hedonic and the genuine. So I would suggest the quality of relaxation of the person on the left is probably better than the quality on the right. But as long as you sort of believe that being out there is what's relaxing you, you're still a bit stuck on this kind of hedonic side of things, right? And what I'm talking about here, sources of genuine happiness, are an ability to cultivate that sense of relaxation wherever you are all on your own. Just to be able to do it yourself, we just rest back in a very natural baseline. Okay? It can be done. Lots of people have done it. It's not a big deal. You know, I train people to do it. So I would argue the quality is better. However, it's how you do it. You know, and to be honest, if you're developing that sense of natural internal relaxation, then it helps to be in places like that. You know, I mean, they build monasteries in places like this for that very reason. You know, because they know if you want to get your mind, you want to get settled and calm, it's helpful to be somewhere where everything else is settled and calm and spacious, right? So it does help. But the difficulty again, and I'm just coming back to the advice people often get or give, is that just getting out in nature will reduce your stress. Well, not if you bring all your stress with you, you know. And so like we were saying, yeah, we're all way overstimulated. Yeah, we are, to the point that even if we get to a place like this, we can bring all that stress with us. So it's really important to think about, yes, it's great to get out there, but that's like a crutch or a support to help you develop the sort of relaxation that you need. And when you get good at it, you can pull that relaxation up all the time, even in really highly charged situations, you know. But you need to sort of be able to remember, and this comes back to mindfulness training, that often, you know, the hedonic looks like genuine. That genuine comes from within, that I can, now that I'm in this place where things are calm and still, I should actually work on getting my mind and my body calm and still for a bit. Because why? Because if I remember to do that in the rest of my life when things are actually in motion and stressful, then I'm going to make better decisions. I am not going to take my stress home with me. I'm not going to wake up worrying about what's coming. All right? So that's where we're at. This idea of differentiating this hedonic from genuine, but also using hedonic as much as you can in the service of genuine, because there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing at all. Okay. So I sort of laugh, and when I was younger, I did it too. You see people going camping or go out somewhere in nature, you know, and they bring, you know, well, nowadays you can fit your whole record collection on a little stick with big speakers and a, you know, truckload of beer. So as if you need to be stimulated, right? And actually the bonus of being out there is that you have the luxury now of not being stimulated. Why not just rest in that? And not because it's really, let's say it this way, it's really important to do that, because the more you can do it in those types of situations, the more likely you are to pull it off when you actually need it in highly charged situations, in a classroom with clients, in a hospital, in your office, wherever it might be. Okay. And yes, watching sport is more stimulation, I agree, but it is the Pipeline Masters. So so we're back to this. Oh, wait, and so there was a comment there from Lorraine who was saying, I have a hard time with the term mistake because you make the best decision at the time. Yeah, it's true. So perhaps if you like, I mean, I got to admit, I have a bit of a Buddhist background, so sort of don't shy away from these terms. But another word that would work really well would be misinterpreted. And there's a couple of aspects of this. So yeah, I misinterpreted something. It could be anything. You know, somebody looked really angry and I thought they're angry at me, but they were angry at something that happened to them on the way to work. You know, that can happen. So I've misinterpreted that. I've misinterpreted this type of stimulation as being genuine rather than hedonic. And then underlying that misinterpretation, and this is the sort of part where, again, I want to come back to this idea that it's not your fault. You come back to this misinterpretation is, I would argue that these sorts of things, they are appearing as if it's a good idea. Like heroin to an addict looks like a good idea. Even if their longer term goal is not to stay on it, at that moment in time, they misinterpret it. the same way you misinterpret, drinking or all these, junk food, watching movies, TV, shopping. There's plenty more. I'm just kind of riffing. And it's a misinterpretation of them as something that's going to help. And to even drive further home the idea that it's not your fault, you've probably heard your whole life that these are the solutions, or you've got professional advice that these things are going to help with your stress. And yeah, so it's mistaken. But I get what you're saying. You don't want to get caught up in this idea of mistake and caught in the past, which is why you should probably come along tomorrow if you have the time, because we're going to talk about regret and guilt, which is really what you're talking about there. Okay, that's called what's it? Cross promotion, I think. Yeah. Anyway, where are we? We're cultivating causes, and then we're coming to this, eliminating obstacles. Our obstacles are mistakes or perhaps misinterpretations, if that's better for you. And no, thank you, Lorraine. That's great. It's really helpful. And the mistakes or the misinterpretations we make are this. We interpret hedonic happiness as genuine. We think regret and guilt are the same thing, right? It's a misinterpretation then. Same with our past actions and choices. We misinterpret a lot around that, which we'll look at tomorrow. We misinterpret our empathy as compassion. We mistake our empathy as being compassion, which, right now, for some of you, you've heard it before. For some of you, you haven't. It's okay. We'll get there in the next couple of days. But so you're cultivating causes. If you're going to cultivate those causes, you need to accurately identify them, right? Kindness, compassion, attention, and so on. And you need to make sure that you're interpreting it correctly. And in order to do that, it just takes a bit of learning, right? A bit of study maybe, just to figure it out. Then what you need, the ingredient here that's missing, when you have all that figured out and it makes perfect sense, and you walk back out into the rest of your life and just go back to your old habits, which is what will happen, right? And again, that just makes you normal, is because you need to be able to remember in the outside world that this is the case. You need to be able to remember this is how it works. And of course, the way to do that is to train your memory, or train your working memory capacity, or perhaps a better way is do some mindfulness training, right? And I would go further and argue there are different types of mindfulness training, and you should probably stick with an authentic one that has a proven track record of maybe, I don't know, minimum 2,000 years. But, we all have our issues. I have mine, so let's not go there, okay? As I've said, as I said, mistakes here, cultivating causes. So yeah, we're back right where we started. So look, I would hope, I know it's sort of a fairly big amount of information in a short period of time that you might not have heard before, which makes it even harder. But I started off saying this, I wanted to really make sure that you would know how to interrupt some underlying causes of stress, right? And today we're looking at happiness, how to start pulling stress out from the root rather than drown out the symptoms. And so today, talking about sort of types of happiness, what I've been pushing, I guess, is the idea that our culture and even people in positions of authority recommend like hedonic, resource-driven happiness as an antidote to stress. And it's not. It might help you some of the time, most of the time, avoid stress for a little while, right? But it's not an antidote. What I'm putting forward is that this sense of genuine happiness, what we call things you can cultivate internally, is a direct antidote, right? That actually that will dial your stress down. But you need to train in it, need to train in people who know what they're talking about to get there. So I hope over today and the next 2 days, that becomes more clear. It takes a bit of work, of course. Yeah, so I was saying, there are two ways dealing with stress: drown it out. And there are healthy ways of drowning it out. I will probably also go swim laps at the pool later today. There's nothing wrong with it. But also this idea of figuring it out and using techniques to get it on your side, okay? And so for today, what we've looked at is a sense of figuring it out as being in terms of what really happiness actually is. And given there's human history, there's not much agreement. I have a very simple version that I present that is about 2,500 years old, this idea that there's two types, and that they're not good or bad, just that you need to use the hedonic skillfully to get the genuine payoff. And it takes a bit of work, it takes a bit of training, probably takes a bit of support from someone who knows how it all works to help you through. Which is why we've looked at this, types of happiness. Tomorrow we'll look at guilt versus regret, which we've already touched on. And of course, this idea of empathy and compassion. So yes, Debbie's saying the remembering is the not so easy bit. Absolutely, it's the not so easy bit. Because whatever reactions you do have to stress. When I get stressed, I go to the fridge or the pub or wherever, whatever, you've done them so many times that now that's just your knee-jerk reaction to stress. And you need to be able to remember, and if it's not a helpful reaction, then you need to remember that it's not helpful, which is really hard. We can get a long way through unhelpful things we don't want to do before we catch ourselves. So yeah, it is the hard part. That's why it requires training. And the training you require is actually mindfulness relaxation training. And I would suggest looking for being careful, diligent in finding an approach to mindfulness training that you like, because again, it's not just one thing. There's a lot of different ideas. Even within Buddhism or within Indian religions, there's different ideas of what mindfulness is. And if you go to a mindfulness conference of psychologists and there's 100 people in the room, you can be sure there's 150 ideas of what mindfulness is there. So you really have to, source it out for yourself, really know that people aren't talking about the same thing. And so then, of course, if you're under extra pressure, maybe you've got projects, deadlines, or as Lorraine's saying, COVID, okay, then you're already less likely to remember. I hope this is clear. It's really important. The more pressure you're under, the less likely you are to remember that your reaction isn't helpful, isn't healthy. Or maybe a nice way of saying it is, the less likely you are to remember there's a better way to react. Okay, so that makes it really hard, because the more pressure you're under, the more likely you are to screw it up, and the stakes are probably higher. What you need to know is that as you start to do this type of training and think, there's a different way, I'd like to do this differently, then it's all percentages. You'll just get it wrong at first. Like, you could understand everything I'm going to say in the next 3 days, word for word, be able to explain it to other people, but still get it wrong as soon as you walk out the door. And then the more pressure you're under, the more likely you are to get it wrong, because you'll just go back to your old habits, and that's okay. The more training you do, and I've got this far, people who know me, I've got this far without saying it, but the thing that will get you across the line, the thing that will help you remember when you're under pressure, is attention training, right? Or mindfulness training, if you like. That's what'll do it. Yep. And of course, you can't do that unless you're relaxed, which comes back to that sense of relaxation again that I mentioned earlier. So Alberta, I haven't been following what happened in Canada, Lorraine. We just, on the northern beaches, Sydney's basically locked down. We just closed borders again, I think yesterday or the day before. So we'll wait and see what happens in the coming months. But this is an extraordinarily unusual time. To be honest, this is the time to stop and try to, to get our act together and to respond differently, because it's really, there's a mental health tsunami on its way because of COVID, and it hasn't hit yet, I don't think. Anyway, so that's it. Of course, if you want to, if you want to get some support, look, we'll talk about this some other time. If you want to, part of what I do, I work with people, is this online program. If you're interested, just message me and we'll get in touch about it. I don't want to market at you, which is what someone's done for me here. But here's one thing though, for sure. If you do want to, if this makes sense to you, or the coming days make sense to you, it isn't a quick fix. I've tried to present it like that. You need to rethink stress and rethink things and be mistaken, or perhaps, if you like, misinterpreting, if that's more helpful for you. And you really do need to be able to put some time aside. So if you're interested, then just send me a message and we'll get in touch and talk about it, okay? And so let me know, are there any questions, doubts, objections are my favorite. Hallelujahs are also welcome. anything you'd like to ask? Otherwise, I'll see you again tomorrow, probably. Oh, thanks, Debbie. Yep, I'll be here again at 9, my time, of course. Okay. Well, hey, thanks, everyone. I'll do the same again tomorrow. I will try to get it done within an hour. And if you have questions, we can ask. We can discuss regret and guilt and regret. So also, I will have, yeah, I guess people who can't travel. I'm so sorry for you. Yeah. And what I will do is I will get this recorded and set up and post it. So if you wanted to, if you wanted to watch it again, or if there's somebody you think might like to watch it, you can pass it on to them. But I'll put it up. Okay. So I will see you tomorrow. If you're here, please do get in touch. If you have any questions, just go ahead and do it. Right? No problem. I love hearing from people, and I read everything. Okay. Yeah, I'll send the slides through. All right, everyone. See you tomorrow. And there we go. Bye. Actually, I'll see some of you tonight, of course. The Beyond Mindfulness people, we're on it tonight. I'll see you there. Okay. Bye.